Hey friends, sometimes the raw poetry is too powerful. The technology can't cope. Things cut out. Things happen that will never be on record. But the important thing is, everything else is on record. So we're going to come in just after my poem. Who needs that? If you want the full thing, listen to the audio podcast. A little bit of exclusive content for you there. But otherwise, we're back in. We've got Raymond Antrobus, who's amazing. He's going to come in, introduce his first poem, and then we're going to ride it on home from there. It's a little baseball riding, like they do in the games.
So in 2014, my dad had passed away, and coincidentally, before he passed, I came to Margate. I just got on the train and came up here and just was walking around, and I sat in the Turner and wrote the first draft of what became the title poem for this book called The Perseverance. And I was kind of processing a lot, and I think the sea helped me find some kind of rhythm that was needed to access this poem. So I grew up in a place that no one here has heard of called Hackney. I think every other person I've met in Margate so far is from Hackney. So, and in Broadway Market, there's this long street, and it's a street which is punctuated by pubs. So you've got the Cat and Mutton at the one end, and then at the other end you have the Perseverance. It's kind of like a sentence. I always think of it in that way. Also because watching it go from like the late 80s through the 90s and watching that whole area completely shift and change and regenerate. I think the Perseverance is the one pub that's still sketchy as it ever was. But the significance to me of that pub is that it's the only pub that my dad wasn't barred from in that whole area. So I had all these memories of being left outside that pub because when I was a kid, my dad struggled. He was an alcoholic, so I had an alcoholic dad as a kid. And so many early memories are just standing outside the Perseverance, just kind of watching people come in and out of that door. I mean, even my own dad, who, one version of him would enter and another version would come out. So this is an old poem written in 2015, even though it wasn't published until 2018, because publishing world is long, as poets will know. And my dad's favorite singer was one of the Wailers called Peter Tosh. Peter Tosh, the eldest member of the Wailers. Bob was like the little youngest of the group, but he came through. But my dad loved Peter Tosh. It was him that he would always speak about. And I actually heard the word overstanding earlier, so I was like, okay, cool, definitely gonna do this poem. The Perseverance. Love is the man overstanding, Peter Tosh. I wait outside the Perseverance. Just popping in here a minute, I'd heard him say it many times before. Like all kids with a drinking father, watch him disappear into smoke and laughter. There's no such thing as too much laughter, my father says, drinking in the Perseverance until everything disappears. I'm outside counting minutes, waiting for the man, my father, to finish his shot and take me home before it gets dark. We've been here before. No such thing as too much laughter, unless to my mother without my father, working weekends while the Perseverance spits him out for a minute. He gives me 50p to make me disappear. 50p in my hand, I disappear like a coin in a parking meter before the time runs out. How many minutes will I lose listening to the laughter spilling from the Perseverance while strangers ask, "Where is your father?" I stare at the doors and say, "My father is working." Strangers who don't disappear, but hug me for my Perseverance. Dad said this will be the last time before, while the TV spilled canned laughter, us on the sofa in his council flat, knowing any minute the yams will boil, any minute I will eat again with my father, who cooks and serves laughter, good as any Jamaican who disappeared from the island I tasted before overstanding our heat and Perseverance. I still hear, popping in for a minute, see him disappear. We lose our fathers before we know it. And I'm still outside the perseverance, listening for the laughter. Thank you.
So we did this gig together 10 years ago, but I got to know you through the sort of London spoken word scene at that time, doing slams, doing other things. Can you just explain quickly what Chill Pill was?
Oh, wow, yeah. Chill Pill was a poetry night set up in 2010 with me, Mr. G, Deanna Roger, Simon Mole, later Adam Cameling. Each of us occupied a different kind of, I don't know, disciplinary kind of thing. So G was a poet as well as a stand-up comedian. Deanna was a poet as well as an actor. Adam was a poet as well as a rapper. Simon was a poet as well as a children's performer and a rapper as well. And then I was... They kind of called me the purist because I was the one that was like, poetry is everything. It's in my bones. I was just so passionate about poetry. Like that's what I wanted to be known as, the poet of that group and everything about it. So yeah, anyway, and then it started in a basement in Bethnal Green, and we had about like 5 people at the first one, and then by the third one, it got mad because like people, like word would get out, and then we would have musicians. We suddenly, people like Jamie Woon and Ed Sheeran and just many people. I just don't want to sound like I'm just name dropping, but like these massive people would just coming in like, oh, I heard this is the night, I can just try something new, because that was a philosophy of the night, right? It was you show up, and we had this little rug, and you had to stand on the rug and perform something that was new. That was the whole kind of idea of it, and it kind of grew and grew. And then within a year, we started going to theatres. So we peaked when we got to Soho Theatre, which is when we had you. And we had a night. One of my proudest ever moments as a curator of Chill Pill was having Harry Baker, Keith Jarrett, Holly McNeish in a row, like one poem each. So that would consecutively UK Slam champions. Right, and then at the end of that, you then got Rafif Zaida, who's this incredible Palestinian Canadian poet, who it was just such a memorable kind of night. But it's funny, Chill Pill's not around anymore as a night, but we all still hang out. We've got like a WhatsApp group, so I'm interested in that idea of the community and the people that poetry brings you to and connects you with. So that's always been part of the philosophy, so it doesn't have to just be this public thing. It's also a kind of social and spiritual thing.
Amazing. And in terms of being the purist, I remember even at the time it was basically a podcast before they were called podcasts, but you used to interview people and you loved it. And I remember doing that. And
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I think when I first saw Harry Baker perform, I was mesmerized and intimidated, because I remember you were about 16?
Would have been 17. Yeah.
17, and I just remember I think I might have been 21, 20. I don't know, either way, I was like, who is this child? Why are they so good? And actually, what was really going on, Harry, was I was trying to be your friend. I was just trying to be your friend. That's all I was doing. I was like, I had to investigate myself. It's like, this is a bit of professional jealousy. But no, I like Harry. I want him to like me.
Come on, wow. I'm just trying to be your friend now, so it's worked.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Incredible. One thing I wanted to ask you, just because I've just come back from the States, and I know you've spent time here and there, what is your experience as a writer and performer in terms of performing in the States versus performing here? Does it feel different, or is it?
Yeah, it's definitely different. As a poet, like specifically poetry, I found it interesting going there, and perception is something I think a lot about. I think because of my own perception anxieties. But I would ask poets in the States what their perception of British poetry is. and quite often it would be you're a little bit nostalgic, you're a little bit traditional, you're a little bit da-da-da, and we're like, the American school is newer, it's broken open. And that does tie into the history, considering, America is a former British colony, whole war. I mean, I don't have to give anyone a history lesson on that, but like, that makes sense with the history of the place. And American English, even through the language, so it's there's a reluctance, a kind of kicking away of Britishness within American culture, which I find really, it's endearing, and I found that I was getting more of my poems published in the States than I was in the UK at first, because I felt there was more of an openness, I suppose, and that's what I mean about the traditions that is seen in Englishness and English poetry. There's a kind of prizing of restraint. The more restraint you can have in your poetry, the more it is, and that's not quite the case. I mean, I'm trying not to be polemical or to make too many sweeping statements, but that is a general atmosphere that I find. But I love performing in both places. I mean, I lived in Oklahoma for a year. I lived in New Orleans for a year. I lived in New York for 3 months. Never again. I lived in, where else did I go? Those are the main places, actually. But I'm like you as well, quite often there and being invited to speak, mainly at universities. I was just in Arizona, and just seeing and understanding America as like each state is a different country. You know what I mean? Like New Orleans is very different to anywhere else. And as someone, because as well as that, I also spend a lot of time in the Caribbean. With my family that are out there, so I have, I think, one of my powers, I suppose, or one of my privileges is going to all these different parts of the world. And you know what I said about a kind of perception anxiety. It's kind of helped me widen my perception, and therefore it's relaxed me a bit, because no matter where you go, you're going to be read in a different kind of way. And I think growing up, I always thought people were quite one-dimensional. No, not one-dimensional, but like I felt at odds because no one could look at me and know who. I have a very ambiguous look, so I just kind of fit in anywhere, whereas no one else in my family does. Like if my dad walked in here, he was a tall Jamaican Rasta man. My mum walked in, she is, an English woman from the 70s or 60s. Like you can see that in them. And me, I kind of walk in, and then I would often hear other people what they throw at me, like I'm like Egyptian or Greek, or I mean there's be like this kind of disappointment when I'm not what people think I am. And then I'm also deaf, and I also have to lip read, and then I'm like there's all of this stuff going on. I know. Sorry, I'm just talking.
No.
Please do guide me, because I'm really good at just talking.
I love it. I first went to the States when I was 18, basically 17, started doing all these poetry open mic nights. Loved it so much so that I was going to study medicine and thought, I don't want to do that because I won't have any time for poems. And so, but then in my gap year before all of that kicked off, I just Googled poetry slams and went to the 4 places in America that came up. And so it was New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and then Austin, Texas for some reason. And I didn't know how big America was. But like you say, it was 4 different countries. But also, in terms of perception, I was this absolute stereotype of this 18-year-old British boy. I was called Harry, which they loved.
Harry Potter. I was about to ask you about that.
Finished a poem at a slam, and someone shouts out 10 points for Gryffindor, and everyone loses their minds. And genuinely oh, do you know the Queen? So much of that. But I found the hospitality was incredible, and as a shy 18-year-old who had like pushed myself out of my comfort zone to go and was willing to say like yes to stuff once I was there, it was as formative for me as a person as it was for me sort of as a performer.
I agree.
So I love the culture of it. And then I went to some of these like American slam poetry competitions and found the style of poetry was so much more consistent and curated, and like a slam poem is a certain thing. And I was there and I had some poems that fit that idea, and then some that were like whimsical love poems about prime numbers that sort of confused them. And so I found it fascinating. And then coming back, I had a real love for the UK scene and the breadth of things that you could talk about, and the fact that you could be funny or you could be raw and emotional and you could do all of those things. And so it was kind of a going away and coming home moment for me. But
I had a similar thing. Actually, I should have said that, because I had a similar kind of thing of at 17, I just had to leave away. I did that quite common thing of like someone breaks your heart and you run away. Well, I was a kid. I must have been 17 myself, and 17, 18, and ran away and ended up doing voluntary work in Ohio. Columbus, Ohio, though, is the capital of the city, and I had a great time there. And there was this night that does a talent contest, actually, and so they had all these people getting up, and someone, some people got up, and a range of stuff happened, and one person got up and did a poem, and I remember being like, oh, that's what I want to do, because I just did that instinctively, and then, like you, just kind of looked up, like, oh, where can I do this in the UK? And then stumbled into the Poetry Cafe in Covent Garden first, and then the following day went to, I'm not even going to say the name, a poetry night, which I remember we were both at.
Another one.
I became invested in becoming a slam champion, and that took about 3 years. That was another thing about Harry. Harry walked in from nowhere and won the UK slam champion the first time he went for it, right? So just saying, there's a slam royalty right here. And I was like, it's taken me 4 years just to get to the finals. So anyway, but once I got there, I won a trip to Chicago to perform with at the Green Mill.
Yes.
With Mark
Smith.
Mark Smith, and that was that. Like you say, kind of encountering this very different kind of style, this very different world, but also feeling such a deep appreciation for where I was, but then a deeper appreciation when I came back, because I totally understand you about the range of poetry that is here. And that was kind of, Chill Pill kind of also wanting to embody that, of that everyone, it's not just poetry, it's a range of things, so people can live through poetry and find their way to it through theatre, through punk, through, music, through folk, like any avenue can welcome it and hold it.
Amazing. I would happily speak all night, but we've got to do some poems.
Yeah, sorry.
You up for me doing something new? It's technically 2 poems, but if we call it a poem in 2 parts, then we can keep it in the same section. And there is a bit in the film, I remember this the other day, there's a bit in When Harry Met Sally where he talks about how you shouldn't go and meet someone at the airport, because then they will expect you to be there, and then will come a moment when you don't go there, and that's how you know when your sort of relationship is falling apart. And I bring that up because in January it was mine and Grace's 6th anniversary, and I wrote her a poem for our 1st, 2nd and 3rd anniversaries, and then there's been a pause. So I was feeling the pressure this year to make up for 3 years' worth. Let's blame COVID. But each year it was sort of loosely based on whatever like the thing is for that year. So 3 years is apparently leather. So it was about us getting old and wrinkly. And so this year, 6 years is apparently sugar. So I wrote this poem, and it's called Sticky Toffee Pudding. Your love is old T-shirts and songs I know the words to. As soon as I am with you, I feel safe. You help me try to be the greatest version of myself. I plan to spend this lifetime doing just the same. It's like the floor is lava, how you set my soul on fire. You are sourdough and canal boats, you're all I need and more. Like my reusable water bottle, I am lost without you. Like sticky toffee pudding, you are delicious and warm. The furrow of your brow when you are reading, the nuzzle of your nose into my neck, the way your eyes light up when you eat chocolate. Everything about you is the best. You are my favorite place to cry. You are my favorite place to nap. Our love is a supply teacher. It can take many forms. You're very understanding when I dribble on your lap like stiffy coffee pudding. You are warm. When I curl up in a ball and cannot function, you somehow know exactly what to do. When all I see is disaster at every junction, you always find a way to pull me through. Like sunflowers at funerals, you brighten up my mornings. Just like the letter Y, I want to end each day with you. Despite the fact you flinch when I am driving, I'm pretty sure deep down you trust me too. And now everything's about to change forever. But then again, everything always is. Was it not everything changing that meant we ended up together? Whatever's next, I know we'll never not have this. And when it's all up in the air, we will learn to fall with style. When everything's at sea, I will be with you in that storm. When we're coming into land, just let me hold you for a while. Like sticky toffee pudding, you are warm. Thank you. And just like sticky toffee pudding, that poem is so sweet, it might actually be bad for you. But I really love putting that together. But then in putting it together, there were lots of lines that sort of didn't feel appropriate to put into that sort of tone of poem. So I've also got another poem of sort of outtakes that didn't quite make the first poem. And my hope is I've built up enough goodwill in the room to get away with these. But just to warn you, some of these should go in the sort of outtakes of the outtakes poem. And the first line is a lot, but we'll get past it. Your ass is like Joe Biden. It just refuses to quit. Like when Starmer looks at Corbyn, I'm scared of being left by you. Sometimes this love can be unbearable, like you when you are tired. Like a holy sleep in church, you are the thing that gets me through. Like converting to Buddhism, you make my heart go calmer. Like the sound of seagulls fighting, you make me feel like home. With you I found the thing I seek, like Guru Nanak. Like Pumbaa riding solo, I do not need to moan. Like my medically diagnosed fat ankles, by this point I cannot picture life without you. Like a rugby player's existential crisis, I'm not sure I even want to try. Like a rock climbing enthusiast, you help me to feel bolder. Like the fact Tom Cruise is 61, you're always on my mind. In front of you is the one time that I feel sexy, except that summer when I ran loads and got really fit and tanned. Then I did a rap battle when they said I looked like I was on heroin. And yet somehow you still managed to pull it back. And then a well-meaning Australian dentist slid into my Instagram DMs and said she's enjoying the videos, but on closer inspection is worried I might have gum disease. You even made me feel good after that. The murmur as you start to fall asleep mid-conversation, although I know you have dropped off because you don't laugh at my jokes. The fact that right now you are thinking that can't be the explanation because when you are awake, you also don't laugh at my jokes. When you don't know what you want or who you are or what to do, I know exactly what I want, and that's to spend my days with you. I know this poem will not be your favourite. That honour is reserved for Bond James Bond. You may well think those lofty heights will never be eclipsed. Here's to a lifetime trying to prove you wrong. Thank you. Are you up for doing something new?
I am.
Wonderful.
I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Raymond. I'm a poet, and I'm also a children's novelist. So I'm going to read you a story, if you don't mind. If you do mind, you can leave now. It would take me about 7 minutes or 8 minutes. This is my next children's book. It's called Terrible Horses. And I'm reading this here at poetry night because it's based on a story which I would often tell to many young aspiring poets going into schools. By show of hands, how many people here have a sibling? Show of hands. How many people here are the youngest sibling? Interesting. Most people here seem to be the youngest siblings. It makes sense, right? The youngest sibling would become the poet. It does make sense. And this story might even speak to that. And there was some horses, some horse energy in the open mic as well. So I think we'll just begin. This is illustrated by a friend of mine, the brilliant Ken Wilson Max. Are you ready? All right. Terrible Horses. I have not read this to anyone other than my son. So you're like the first people to get this. Terrible Horses. More horses. My sister is older than me. When I was born, she thought she'd have to leave home. My sister is cooler than me. I want her friends to be my friends. I want her things to be my things. She wants her friends to be her friends. She wants her things to be her things. I'm getting hard, relate energy in here. This is good. This is good. This is my audience. My sister and me fight, push, pull, hurt, hide. We do not use our words. To cool off, I go to my room, take a pen and paper, and write stories. Stories about terrible horses. In the story, I am a pony. Everyone else in the world is a horse. Can I get an aww? Poor little brother. They trample, gallop, and neigh. It is lonely being a pony. My sister and me fight. This fight happened because I took her things without asking. This fight happened because I jumped on her bed without asking. This fight happened because I wandered off without asking. There were no words for the really big fight I had with my sister except push, pull, hurt, hide. After that, I go back to my room with my pen and paper and I write about terrible horses, their terrible trampling, their ghostly galloping, their nagging neighing. I write about the pony that couldn't compete, that can't speak, that can't sleep. I wake. I can't find my book of terrible horses. Where? Where is my book of terrible horses? My sister is here in my room. Is she galloping towards me? Is she smiling a whole smile? Wait, is she saying sorry? She never says sorry. No, she's hugging me. And there's my book of terrible horses. My sister has read it. My sister has read it. What did she see? Is she a terrible horse? Or a pony?
Come on. I love this because in December we had Mark Grist and he read from his kids book, and he hadn't done it to like a room full of adults before. And then we've just had you do that, so it feels like we've started a tradition of sort of
I was going to say
adult story time. It's
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Yep.
Amazing. Is this your second?
my
kids
second
book?
one.
Is
Yes,
that right?
yes.
Does having a kid change how you see kids' books, if that makes sense?
Yes, but also interestingly, I wrote both of these books. Kambersky is the first one. This is the latest one. Before I was a dad,
Okay.
because I felt like a number of things were happening. I've done. People were talking about mental health earlier. I've been in different kinds of mental health therapies for 10 years now, and one of the really powerful ones I found was IFS, internal family systems. So people that like know about their therapy would know about that one. You know, I've done like CBT and a range of things. IFS was really amazing because it's all visualization exercises, and it actually lent itself really well to what I do as a poet, because before gigs, before readings, I have to, in order to give myself the confidence, I suppose, to like speak in front of rooms of people, I have to visualize how it's going to go. This is part of my thing. Like, okay, look, I imagine the worst thing that could happen, which was a bit like the poem, the first poem that we heard in the open mic about the heckle. Yeah. Where you just get heckled, boo, ghetto. I'm like, okay, well, if that does happen, no one's ever killing me. I'm still alive at the end of the bad gig. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, so it kind of fed into that. So many skills and just habits that I picked up through writing and performing poetry lent itself really well to practicing different therapy practices. And I then spent 7 years also as a teacher of emotional literacy, and going into prisons, going into schools, going all over the world, as a poet, but also as a kind of art therapist. What was the question again?
How did that turn into a kids' book?
How did this turn into a kids' book? This is what I mean. I need to be reined in.
Like a terrible horse.
Like a terrible horse. Oh, the pun king. That doesn't deserve a round of applause. So basically, while I was living in Oklahoma, has anyone here been to Oklahoma? No? Okay, cool. So I was living in Oklahoma, and I happened to be near the site where the Oklahoma bombing happened. Does anyone remember that? The Oklahoma bombing? Learning about that actually there was really interesting. But there's this tree called the Survivors Tree. And when you go to this museum that's dedicated to the Oklahoma bombing, they tell you about the history and the story and the conspiracy theory. And all. I mean, the story is wild. There's lots of podcasts about it as well. I became a bit obsessed for a little bit about trying to kind of decode all of the stuff that happened there. Anyway, this Survivors Tree, at the end of doing the tour, you're invited to stand by the tree. And the reason it's called the Survivors Tree is because during the bombing, it was the only tree that left standing. And it's miraculous that it's standing because it's so close to the building. It actually makes no sense how this tree survived the blast. So it's now a protected heritage site of Oklahoma. And so I was invited, and many people during the guide, to stand by the tree and think about a conflict in their life, and to then think about a conflict in your life that you've managed to find some resolution for, and think about that story and hold that, and now do something with it. And I wrote Terrible Horses based on that, because my older sister and me used to fight. As you know, and it's true, I used to write all these stories where I was always the pony. And I think that also leads into being the youngest sibling, where so many stories you have of yourself are you're often the persecuted one. Yeah. You know, so I knew I wanted to write something that would, not affirm that, because I don't find that a helpful narrative, to always be the persecuted one. Yeah. So with my children's books, both of them, I kind of wrote them for the child that, like I needed. Like it's again, IFS, internal family systems, you're speaking to your child self a lot. So it kind of accidentally curated access to me to write these things, get in touch with the child self.
Amazing, thank you. Are you up for me doing something borrowed?
Yes.
This is a poem called Atlas, and it was read at a friend's wedding, and I hadn't come across it before, and I really loved it. There is a kind of love called maintenance, which stores the WD-40. Sorry, I'll start again. There is a kind of love called maintenance, which stores the WD-40 and knows when to use it, which checks the insurance and doesn't forget the milkman, which remembers to plant bulbs, which answers letters, which knows the way the money goes, which deals with dentists and road fund tax and meeting trains and postcards to the lonely, which upholds the permanently rickety, elaborate structures of living, which is Atlas. And maintenance is the sensible side of love, which knows what time and weather are doing to my brickwork, insulates my faulty wiring, laughs at my dry rotten jokes, remembers my need for gloss and grouting, which keeps my suspect edifice upright in the air, as Atlas did the sky.
Amazing. So the last long-term gig I did in the States was in Arizona. I was in Arizona in October. Completely coincidental. This was not like a planned thing at all. But I read with a bunch of Palestinian poets, and and that being held in that space was one of the most profound experiences I'd ever had. And anyway, one of the poets I read with and is now a friend is Naomi Shihab-Nye. I emailed her to ask if it'd be all right for me to read this poem of hers to you. It's called Double Peace, and I don't know if people here know of the poet Yehuda Ademichai. He's kind of like a huge deal in Israel. He's kind of like the biggest Israeli poet. He's like the Israeli Seamus Heaney, basically. And Naomi knew him, and they would meet and they would speak. And after their first meeting, she wrote this poem for him, Double Peace for Yehuda Amichai. Double peace not for him and his people alone, but for all who love that rocky land. Everybody sing it. No chosen and unchosen, but everybody chosen sing it. All families living under tiled rooftops or flat roofs with strung clotheslines, T-shirts, bed sheets, flags of surrender. I show you my cloth. I live the way you live. All the cousins, second cousins, extra cousins, unknown cousins. No choice. Everyone is a cousin. Peace, better than hurtful moves. Better sing it. Not rain that fell on a few houses only. Not sun that shone on a few favored yards. Not air in small containers, only for some lungs. Double peace multiplied outside. Inside, every ancient space, every sleek new room with tall windows, peace for sheep and goats grazing in meadows, peace for buckets waiting on doorsteps, peace for brown eggs lined on containers waiting to be cracked, peace in skillets and spatulas. We met at the corner, went to his home for breakfast, stared out the window together, the shining city, the sorrowing city. He said, I would never have taken your father's home. I could never have lived in a stolen Arab home. The great voice of a Jewish people said this to my face. Our conversation where streets converged.
thank you. That was stunning. I performed at an event in December called Voices from Gaza, and it was a mix of Palestinian and British poets, and it was just such an honour to be in that space and amongst those people who, as well as having such a resilience and a sense of hope, have almost out of necessity learnt to be storytellers and to keep their culture and their story alive. But that was beautifully read, thank you. I'll do another poem. Is everyone all right? I sort of want to just sort of sit in that space and exist. But this is my Something Blue, and I normally my poems take a long time, but this one came out quite quickly, and it was partly inspired by last year. I had some outrageous New Year's resolutions. One was my friend Chris was doing this, and I thought it was a good idea, and he decided that on the first day of the year he was going to do 1 press up, and then on the next day he would do 2, and then by the end of the year he would be able to do 365 press ups. And I thought, that's a great idea, but I'll try and do the same thing, except I'll try and do it and sort of keep it a secret from Grace that I'm doing it, so that one day she'll turn around at me and just be like, wow, you're unexpectedly hench now. And that was initially quite easy to find space during the day to do like 1 press up without Grace looking. But when it got to sort of like, I would forget until the end of the day, and then we'd be about to go to bed, and then I would need to do like 43 press-ups. And so I would just be like, oh, I'm just going to check the door's locked, and I would go downstairs and then come back up out of breath and sweaty. It was not a sustainable goal. And then I just sort of gave up for a while. And then I had a gig in Margate in May, and I sort of had remembered this, and I thought, oh, I've not done it for a while, but if anything, my muscles are well rested. And so I decided during that gig at the Tom Thumb Theatre, I would try and complete my daily allowance for the day. And by that point, it was about 130. And so I thought, oh, that's great. I'm doing sort of like 6 or 7 poems. I'll just do 20 press-ups in between them, forgetting that I need breath to do poems, and also that I can't do that many press-ups. And so it started with so much sort of, people were like cheering me on. I felt like such a legend. And then it just got more and more tragic. And then about halfway through the gig, I was just like, guys, we're not going to make it. And so finished with some poems. And then afterwards, I said, if people want to see me try and finish, they can sort of gather around like the school playground and cheer me on. And then I did no more press-ups that year. So based on that, I have written a poem called 20 Achievable New Year's Resolutions, because I thought it would be better to start small. To have an unexpectedly amazing hair day. To drop something and then catch it again before it hits the ground. To decide what my favourite shape is. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a hexagon. To work out the perfect amount of time to cook an Aldi hash brown in the oven. The packet says 18 to 20 minutes, but I would like to crack the exact science. To tell someone what I do without it sounding like an apology. To find a new musical act I love, or rather to let them find me. To turn a sneeze into an impromptu beatbox session. To pack swimming trunks on the train from Margate to London and beyond. To change into those trunks in the toilet on the return journey, then see how long does it take me to sprint from the station to the sea. To buy more drinks for friends and to let friends buy more drinks for me. It may feel like these two would cancel each other out, but there is in fact a net gain of both drinks and time spent with friends. To give up on a book that I am not enjoying. To remind myself that the characters will not take it personally. That if I am 4/5 of the way through and still just trying to get into it, chances are it may not be for me. To cuddle a giant rabbit. I managed this on the 30th of December last year, and I am already looking for my next fix. To go a week without showering because I am instead bathing regularly in the sea like the glorious mermaid that I am. To get on my bike without a destination in mind. To sleep the whole way through the night. To share something that isn't necessarily perfect or even finished. To be something that isn't necessarily perfect or even finished. To hug someone I haven't hugged before. to make a good enough new friend that this isn't weird. To fail at least one of these and for that to be okay. To have an unexpectedly amazing day. Thank you so much. I will get out of the way and let you do something blue in a moment. But before I do, what are your sort of hopes, dreams, expectations for 2024? However small or large you want that question to be.
Yeah, like you, I realized I had to be realistic. There's nothing like giving yourself an expectation only to let yourself down. And then, my thing was about intention. My thing was just do everything with intention. I think I've kind of tumbled and rumbled and flown through life, just led by pure enthusiasm and passion. But I'm at this point, especially as a parent, like my energy isn't an unlimited resource anymore. Like even right now, I'm really holding it together. My son's not well at the moment, so it's like the sleep, everything, is lower. So I kind of actually even didn't want to do too many readings, too many gigs, unless they felt right. And this felt right. This is like a new community, a new home. Like I said, knowing who my people are, the poets. So yeah, just having clear intentions and being present, and social media, just limit it. Yeah, that's it.
Amazing, thank you. Well, we're very grateful to have you, and don't want to keep you up any longer than we need to.
No, this is fine. I wasn't a complaint. I'm sorry, Harry.
No.
Oh, sorry.
That's really sassy as well. Sorry, we're keeping you. No, it's been such a joy, and I could speak to you all night. But also now that you live here, we can
kick it. We got time for sure.
It's not being recorded.